Hi everyone. Imagine the English Channel at night. The sea is as black as a mirror, while the air is torn apart by the howl of engines powerful enough to drive a 100-ton warship to an astonishing speed of 48 knots. This is no ordinary patrol boat. This is the Schnellboot-Germany's fast boat. The Allies gave it a different name, the E-boat. And if you think the E stood for express or elite, think again. It stood for enemy. In this episode, we'll take a detailed look at how German engineering, a rugged steel hull, and powerful Daimler-Benz engines transformed the legendary S-100 class into one of the most feared fast attack craft the Allies ever faced. Ironically, the secret behind this formidable war machine was born not in a naval arsenal, but at a luxury yacht shipyard. In the late 1920s, the German company Lürssen received a commission to build a lavish motor yacht for an American billionaire. The result was Ohika II, one of the fastest private yachts of its time. Its designers achieved what many believed was impossible. They took a traditional round-bottom displacement hull, a design that normally limits a vessel's speed, and made it race across the rough waters of the North Sea. How did they do it? Instead of using a conventional heavy structure, they built the hull with wooden planking over a lightweight aluminium framework. The result was a hull that was both exceptionally strong and remarkably light. When officers of the Kriegsmarine saw the yacht in action, they immediately recognized its military potential. This was far more than a millionaire's plaything, it was the perfect foundation for a revolutionary fast attack craft. In November 1929, the first prototype, S-1, entered service. It would become the ancestor of every German S-boat that followed. Remarkably, a civilian luxury yacht had helped shape the future of naval warfare. Following sea trials, German engineers introduced one of the design's most ingenious innovations. They installed two small auxiliary rudders, one on each side of the main rudder. These could swing outward by as much as 30 degrees, creating what became known as the famous Lürssen effect. At high speed, this system lifted the stern, allowing the boat to ride almost perfectly level instead of dragging its aft section through the water. The result was greater speed, improved stability, and better fuel efficiency. But its most deceptive advantage remained hidden beneath the surface. The boat's broad, flat transom generated powerful hydrodynamic lift at high speeds, dramatically reducing the size of its wake. To enemy lookouts scanning the darkness through binoculars, there was often no long white trail behind the vessel to reveal its position. The S-boot didn't simply move through the night. It seemed to vanish into it, earning its reputation as one of the true ghosts of the sea. Picture a cigar-shaped vessel, about 35 meters, or 115 feet, long. Now imagine that inside this narrow hull lies something like an upside-down skyscraper. Its steel bulkheads divide the boat into 9 watertight compartments, each one serving a completely different purpose. At the very bow is the head, the anchor chain locker, and the trim tank. Just behind it is the petty officer's quarters. 6 bunks are squeezed into the compartment, with one separated by a curtain and reserved for the helmsman, a modest touch of privacy that counted as luxury aboard this floating home. Moving aft, you'll find the captain's cabin on the starboard side, while the radio room occupies the port side. From here, operators maintained communications and monitored enemy radio traffic whenever possible. But the most surprising part lies even deeper inside the boat. As you walk along the narrow center passageway, you realize that the walls on either side aren't walls at all, they're enormous fuel tanks. 3,000 liters of diesel fuel to port and another 3,000 to starboard. You're not walking through a boat so much as through a high-speed fuel tank with a crew inside. Behind these tanks, tucked low in the hull, 14 junior sailors sleep in cramped bunks. Their beds are literally suspended above torpedoes, ammunition, and machinery. At the very stern is the steering compartment, where the hydraulic system controls the massive rudders that keep the boat stable at high speed. Every inch of the interior reflects a careful engineering compromise. Space was constantly traded between fuel, engines, weapons, and crew accommodations. Comfort was sacrificed for speed, range, and, ultimately, the crew's chances of surviving another dangerous night patrol. To make the layout easier to visualize, let's walk through the boat from bow to stern. Compartment 1. Head, anchor gear, and the forward trim tank. Compartment 2. Petty officers and helmsman's quarters with 6 bunks. Compartment 3. Captain's cabin on the starboard side and the radio room on the port side. Compartment 4. 2 3,000-litre fuel tanks supplying the outer engines. Compartment 5. Forward engine room housing 2 of the 3 main diesel engines. Compartment 6. Aft engine room containing the 3rd main engine along with auxiliary machinery. Compartment 7. The largest fuel tanks on the boat, plus a smaller reserve tank beneath the deck. Compartment 8. Crew quarters for 14 sailors, the galley, a second head, and the ammunition magazine with torpedoes. Compartment 9. Aft fuel tanks and the steering compartment with the hydraulic gear that operated the rudders. As you can see, fuel occupied far more space than the crew themselves. That tells you everything about the S-100's primary mission: race to the target at high speed, strike without warning, and disappear into the darkness before the enemy could react. 24 men. This wasn't simply a crew. It was a floating community with a strict chain of command. At the top stood the captain, usually a noble lieutenant zur See. He was often only 25 or 26 years old, yet the lives of every man aboard, and the success or failure of attacks against Allied convoys, rested squarely on his shoulders. Directly beneath him was the senior boatswain, often a seasoned veteran who knew every plank, every rivet, and every sound the boat could make. He commanded the deck crew, the sailors who manned the helm, operated the signal equipment, handled mooring lines, and relayed engine orders through the engine telegraph. They were the visible face of the boat. Far below, in the inferno of the engine rooms, where temperatures could soar beyond 50 or even 60 degrees Celsius, another battle was being fought. Here, the chief engineer led 3 assistant engineers and 6 mechanics. Every patrol depended on 3 powerful Daimler-Benz diesel engines, and these men kept them alive under conditions that were punishing both for man and machine. Their skill often meant the difference between making it back to base, or never returning at all. Then there were the 2 radio operators. While the boat slammed through the waves at high speed, they did far more than send and receive messages. They listened constantly for enemy transmissions, trying to intercept, identify, and sometimes even decipher Allied radio traffic. And then there was perhaps the most unusual job on board. The torpedo mechanic also served as the ship's cook. Imagine the contrast. Half an hour earlier, he might have been carefully setting the firing mechanism of a live torpedo. Now he was standing in the tiny galley, frying eggs and preparing a hot meal for the crew. Life aboard an S-100 left little room for individuality. Most of these crews held together. Those who survived at least 12 combat patrols earned one of the Kriegsmarine's most respected decorations, the Schnellboot War Badge. It was awarded only to those who had repeatedly faced enemy fire, completed their missions, and lived to sail another day. They were known as the Kriegsmarine's night hunters. If you were crossing the English Channel or the North Sea aboard an Allied convoy and spotted a low, dark silhouette racing across the water at nearly 45 knots, your chances of delivering your cargo had just dropped dramatically. The S-100s hunted like wolves, fast, relentless, and incredibly difficult to catch. Their primary hunting grounds were the southern and eastern approaches to the British Isles, where countless convoys carried the fuel, ammunition, food, and equipment that kept the Allied war effort alive. But their reach extended far beyond the waters of northern Europe. S-boats were even deployed to the Mediterranean and the Black Sea. Getting them there was an engineering operation in itself. The boats were partially dismantled, loaded onto railway flat cars, and transported across Europe by rail and inland waterways before being reassembled at their new bases. Imagine it. 1 month an S-boat is prowling the French coast. The next, its propellers are churning through the waters off Sevastopol. The organization behind these operations was just as impressive. The Schnellboot force was divided into 14 flotillas, each typically operating around 8 boats. Supporting every flotilla was a dedicated depot ship, a floating base that served as a repair yard, fuel station, supply depot, and temporary home for exhausted crews between missions. Now consider the numbers. S-boats sank 101 merchant ships, totaling more than 214,000 tons, and that's counting torpedo attacks alone. Add another 37 vessels destroyed by mines they laid, and the total climbs to nearly 360,000 tons of enemy shipping sent to the bottom. Merchantmen weren't their only victims. Destroyers, minesweepers, patrol vessels, and even cruisers all fell prey to the Schnellboot. They even succeeded in sinking an enemy submarine, an extraordinary achievement for a surface attack craft. Their crews were highly decorated for their service. They earned 23 Knight's Crosses of the Iron Cross, one of Nazi Germany's highest military awards, along with 112 German crosses in gold. These numbers are more than just statistics. They tell the story of what 24 men aboard a small, fast attack boat could accomplish, and how a vessel built largely of wood became one of the most formidable weapons in the naval war. Thanks for watching.